Yeah, that's one fine-looking
Irish Republic.
Why doesn't mine look like that?
I have spent years ranting to my friends about why I love Hearts of Iron 4 so much, and while I've yet to convince any of them to buy it, I decided to make this video as an introduction to the game, its mechanics, and why I like them so much. This won't be a full, in-depth guide, but I'll try and cover as many aspects of the game as I can. So, what's this game about? Hearts of Iron 4 is a World War II grand strategy game by Paradox Interactive that is the most in-depth World War II strategy game I know. I've spent hundreds of hours playing it since launch, and I've seen its community continue to grow as its reputation spread over the years. Before we dive into this review, major disclaimer though, this game is big, with lots of little features that tie in together. Now, I've tried to break them off into their own categories to make this review flow better, but it wasn't always something I could neatly do, so there's a little bit of jumping around here. Right off the bat, base game HOI 4 lets you play as any nation on Earth in either a 1936 or 1939 start date. Now, not all nations get the same treatment in terms of content, so I've broken them down into 3 categories, which will come up a few times over this review. Okay, so first up you have your major nations, Germany, the UK, the US, Japan, and others, but I'm going to take the USSR as an example here. These nations are the most fleshed out in the game, getting a lot of unique content, and usually they do tend to be the biggest combatants in any war taking place, so it does make sense. The biggest draw for the major nations is that they have these giant fleshed out focus trees. Now, a focus is basically a powerful buff for your country, and you access them over the course of the game. They can do anything from giving you factories, to starting wars, to awarding you new research bonuses. Anything really. So, for the USSR you have ones that build forts around Moscow, move industry to the Urals, cover the 5-year plans, and even deal with the Great Purge. There's some alt history ones in there as well, such as prepping the country to invade the West. Most of what these trees do is vaguely based on history, though there are some pretty gamey ones and lots of alt history stuff put in there as well. Next up we have the smaller nations, which all have a shared generic focus tree, and this tree is something you'll get used to. It lacks country-specific content obviously, but it is decently powerful, giving you factories, research bonuses, and most importantly, making it easy for you to convert your nation to fascism or communism and militarize if you want to be the aggressor. It also lets you build up defenses though if you think you're the one likely to be attacked. I've played tons of hours on this tree, so it's not going to stop you playing smaller nations. While getting footage for this, I played a quick game as Ireland and turned them fascist and militarized before invading the north, and then even when I had gotten enough footage, I kept playing for probably 5 more hours just because I was having so much fun. Finally, we have Category 3. These are all the minor nations who got a custom focus tree over the years. Now, apart from Poland, who got one at launch as an apology for the game being delayed, these are all DLC nations. I'll cover what countries got a focus tree in their respective DLCs, but for now I'll just say some of these trees are really fun. Okay, now we've got the setup for nations out of the way, let's move through the rest of the mechanics of the game. Aside from focus trees, research is probably the mechanic that changes your nation the most over a campaign. While big nations have different focus trees, research is mostly the same between countries. So, for example, all nations get the same number of tanks and the same tank categories, but Germany gets to make Panzers while the US gets Shermans and they have different 3D models, but by the time you get to the generic smaller nations, it becomes Heavy Tank 3 or Light Tank 2. The content is mostly the same, but it's just some flavour depending on what country you're playing as. There are a few branching paths that allow for different strategies, though a lot of the techs are linear progressions. Some of the research can unlock new weapons to build in your factories, but a lot of it provides modifiers to your economy or existing weapons. Speaking of the economy, that's a pretty big part of the game, so I may as well get around to it now. Obviously, a huge part of World War II was the production lines on the home front, as well as how some nations industrialised heavily in the build-up to the war. So it makes sense that HOI would try and represent this in some way. I'm going to simplify this explanation a bit, but it's not a hard system to get a grasp of in general. So, you have civilian factories which you use to build pretty much any structures in your nation. So this includes better infrastructure to move supplies around, fortifications, ports, or more civilian factories so you can build faster in the future. They're also used to repair buildings that have been damaged in the war, and they can build a few more other things as well, but the core of what they do is there. Then you have military factories, which you can use to build your guns, tanks, and supplies. Research can boost how efficient these production lines are, but in general, every day that a line builds the same thing, let's say guns, it becomes slowly more efficient until it hits a cap. If you were to transfer this line to produce a different type of gun, its efficiency would take a small hit. But if you transferred it to build tanks or planes, it would take a huge hit, so it helps to have a long-term plan about what you're making in these factories. This really is just a surface view of the economy. There's resources needed to produce goods and a trading system, but it's pretty straightforward stuff, so I've left it out of this review for time. Now that your country is armed and ready, it's time to talk war. I've split this up into land, air and sea combat for convenience, though land is probably where you're going to be spending most of your time. So Hoi 4 uses a kind of drawing mechanic for battle plans. You're able to draw a front line with the enemy and then assign your troops to that front, and then you can draw an arrow to point to where you want your armies to go, and then roughly the main route of attack that you want them to follow. This is a pretty simple system and it's very good for visualizing, but you're able to micromanage the divisions as part of the larger plan if that's what you want to do. You could also entirely ignore this system if you really wanted, though you'd lose the planning bonuses the game gives you for planning out these attacks in advance. Speaking of your armies, how good they are is actually based on a thing called division templates. Though you get default ones with every nation, you can modify them or make entirely new ones if you want. There's tons of stats on these pages to help you figure out how good your units are, and these stats include things like unit attack, defense, organization, production cost, speed, etc. There's tons of stuff here. Now, you might be playing as a country that has plenty of manpower to throw at the enemy, but an awful economy that can't support building tanks and artillery, so you just throw men at the enemy. So if you're playing as a country like this, you may not care too much about how good your divisions are. But just as likely you'll be playing as a nation that has tons of factories, but next to no manpower. So then you really need to strategize on how you can protect your men and still maximize the damage you do to your enemy. Of course, all these armies need leaders, and this game uses a general system, where units are under a general who gives them a stat boost, and can level up from fighting to give better percentage stats to their troops. One DLC in particular touches on this system, but I'll get to that later. For now, let's move on to air combat. In Hoi 4, the entire globe is split up into different sectors where you can assign your planes to combat. There's a number of different missions that they can take part in as well, such as strategic bombing, close air support, air superiority, and so on. Obviously, different plane types exist, and they're either better at a certain mission, or they're the only plane type that can do that mission at all. So, for example, fighters are good at bomber interception and air superiority, but they can't bomb enemy factories. Air combat is probably something you can get away with ignoring as an absolute beginner, but before long you're going to want to figure out how to support your ground units to make them more effective, or just to harass the enemy's production lines or armies. On top of this, you can train up paratroopers to drop behind enemy lines, so it's going to be important to figure out air combat sooner rather than later. Finally, while you have all the different fighters and bombers, every plane can also get its own aircraft carrier variant, so you can take them to the sea, which brings us around to the last theatre of combat. Naval warfare is similar to air warfare in the sense that you have stacks of ships and can send them off to a sector to do any number of tasks, such as patrolling areas, defending convoys, or supporting naval invasions. Navies are built in dockyards, which are like military factories, but obviously they have to be built on the coast. And unlike smaller units like planes and tanks, ships can actually be repaired, which is good since they are pretty heavy investments for a player's economy. Depending on your nation, naval warfare might be something you can ignore. But as soon as you rely on convoys for vital resources or need to cross an ocean, you're probably going to need a navy that can at least hold its own. Naval warfare was actually a focus of one of the DLCs, so I guess it's finally time to move on to them. Okay, so bear with me here. There's a lot of interesting stuff in these DLCs, but I felt that this video would be far too long if I went into every detail, especially on the focus trees. So I'm just going to cover each DLC in the order that they came out in, noting what features got added, how much they cost, and how they scored on Steam. I'll note what nations got a focus tree, but I won't cover too much about the specifics of the individual trees. There's a few overarching points I want to make right now though. Firstly, if you're asking yourself, do I need these DLCs? I'd say the answer is probably no. Wait until you've exhausted the base game content before you buy anything else, and by then you'll be able to look at what they add and see if that's what you want. If you know someone with the DLCs already though, you can play multiplayer with them and the game will let you try out the DLC features as well. There is a slight division in the community about whether some features in these DLC packs should have been free or not, but you'll see what I mean when I get into things. The first DLC pack is called Together for Victory. This adds focus trees for the Commonwealth nations of South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and India, allowing them to build and grow within the Allies or break free from the Commonwealth and go their own way. The rest of the features are a bit smaller though. There's a new autonomy system where you can puppet other nations on a few different tiers, which gives you trade-offs in terms of the resources they give you. You can give them weapons or build on their land to make them slowly more dependent, or they can become less dependent by trading with you and contributing towards your wars. Other features include asking your allies to send you equipment. You also get a new spearhead option when drawing battle plans, which makes you attack over a much more narrow front. You can share technology with your allies, which makes it faster to research things for them, and you get more detailed battle logs as well. You can probably see what I mean about paywalling features that honestly don't make sense to paywall. This is reflected in the reviews, with this only having 48% positive reviews on Steam at the moment. This pack costs €15 but can go down to $7.50 on sale, which is what I paid for it. The second DLC, Death or Dishonour, focuses on some minor European nations, adding focus trees for Hungary, Romania, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia. I've played a lot with these countries, particularly Hungary and Romania, so I am a bit biased towards how good this pack is. But even then, apart from the focus trees, I'm not a fan of what it adds. The features brought in are equipment conversion, which I've rarely found useful, the ability to license military tech and designs, which I will admit for a minor nation is kind of useful, and then apart from that, it adds a few new puppet and diplomatic interactions, which are okay, I guess. The final thing that this pack adds is a few more music tracks, and while these are very good, when I'm looking at the DLC, I'm not too interested. I feel that this pack isn't trying to add as many features as a lot of the other packs, and it is reflected in the price, being €10, so this is the cheapest DLC and can go down to €5 on sale. And despite my negativity on the pack, as I said, the focus trees are excellent. Waking the Tiger is DLC 3. Mostly focusing on China, this adds focus trees for the People's Republic and the Republic of China. It also gives the minor warlords a new generic tree, so while they share the same focus tree, it is more fleshed out than the generic one. Germany and Japan also got alt history paths in this DLC as well, and this includes Monarchist Germany, which is a fan favourite focus tree. It fleshes out the general system with unlockable traits to make your generals more specialised. And as well as that, it introduces field marshals, which are kind of like generals for your generals. This was in Hearts of Iron 3, but kind of in a different way. Overall, this is probably the best DLC feature-wise. Monarchist Germany is fun, and China was such a large area of combat that it sorely needed this kind of content. The reviews reflect this, and this has 76% positive reviews on Steam, making it the highest rated DLC for the game. The main downside, however, is that it is €20 base price, although it can go down to 10 on sale. Man the Guns is the naval-themed DLC that I mentioned earlier. This adds alt history paths for the USA and the UK, and it gives Mexico and the Netherlands their own focus trees. Personally, I feel they should have added one more focus tree for a small nation like Belgium, just to flesh this out a bit more, but I did have a lot of fun playing as Mexico. Anyway, this DLC adds the ship designer to the game, kinda like what you see in 4X space games, where you unlock ship parts and types, and then balance upgrading your ships with the cost of upgrading them. It also adds placing mines in sectors as a naval mission, if you have mine layers in your fleet. The last of the major additions in my opinion is that it basically takes the general's traits from Waking the Tiger and gives them to admirals. After that, it's just a few more bullet points. Naval treaties on ship sizes are added, so early game you can't build giant ships, though eventually nations break these like happened in the actual build up to the war. Amphibious vehicles are added, though this is just some variants for tanks and other mechanized units. You can probably tell by this point, but this DLC is mostly useless if you don't like naval combat. And this would be fine if you didn't have these excellent focus trees for Mexico and the Confederate States of America locked behind a naval-themed DLC. The final point I want to make about this DLC is that the ability to reroute your shipping lanes to avoid hostile waters is actually a DLC exclusive. I know this is something that a lot of the community got salty about, and in my opinion this is probably the worst offender for a feature that should have been in the free game that's part of DLC. If I sound particularly negative at this point, just let me get through the last DLC and then I'll explain the upsides of these DLCs and why I own basically all of them. Anyway, Man the Guns got 56% positive on Steam, is €20 full price and €10 on sale. This brings us on to, at the time of making this video anyway, the latest DLC for Hearts of Iron, La Resistance. And well, it's the worst reviewed DLC for the game at the moment, at 42% positive reviews. Full disclosure, I actually don't own this DLC, because I always buy the Hearts of Iron DLCs on sale, and they never put the newest DLC on sale. With that said, what this DLC adds is kind of the standard affair. France and Vichy France get a lot of attention, and Spain finally gets its much needed focus trees. As well as that, Portugal gets its own focus tree added. In terms of focus trees, these are actually pretty good. Not €20 good, but I will get them as soon as they go on sale. The other features were probably where a lot of the bad reviews are coming from. Espionage is added, which allows you to train off spies and send them off for information warfare or espionage. There was a very popular spy mod for this game, and while it's quite different from what got introduced here, I don't think people liked that what could be a mod is now a €20 DLC. Apart from spies, this DLC adds a few recon units that provide info or stop resistance movements, and code breaking is also introduced. At this point, you might think I despise the DLCs, or that all the fans hate them, but honestly, I've bought them all on sale. Breaking down how much this game has cost me, I spent €40 at launch in 2016, and then €5 to €10 every year or two on DLC. In exchange for that, I've gotten 615 hours of content, so honestly, I can't complain. I love this game. Most of the bad reviews for the DLC say the same thing as well. Not worth the full price, buy on sale. So I wouldn't necessarily be scared off the game just for its DLCs, because even some of the harshest critics still say to buy it on sale, and it's just the main full price that is upsetting a lot of the fans. Finally, to be fair to the devs, whenever a DLC comes out, there's an associated free patch that goes live at the same time. So in 2020, the game has grown and changed a lot compared to its 2016 launch. And into the future, every time there's a new DLC, you will get a lot of new content for free to keep you going. Now that I've said how much time I've sunk into this game, you might be wondering what I actually do that takes up all this time, so I should cover that. For me, Paradox games are excellent in the sense that they give you a lot of tools and mechanics to play with and then leave you to your own devices within the game world. To get direction, I turn to achievement hunting, and the devs are more than aware that lots of players do this, so they've made some excellent achievements for you to hunt for. Some of the achievements are built on DLC content, but there's more than enough in the base game to hunt for. I'm going to fly through some examples, giving the name of the achievement and what you have to do to get them. So you have Duce Nukem, nuke Los Angeles as Italy. The weapons of the Third Emu War, as Australia use a nuclear bomb on core Australian territory. Sunrise Invasion, as Japan conquer Mexico, then Europe, before 1945. Don't Die for Your Country, as Germany in a 1939 start occupy all of Poland and France without taking more than 475 casualties. So the achievement gives you a goal, usually a pretty tough one, and then you have to try and figure out a strategy to get that achievement. And while going for it, you get to enjoy the core gameplay, which is really fun and engaging. Now, I know that achievement hunting isn't for everyone, but another major way that a lot of people play the game is actually multiplayer. I never play multiplayer, but it's pretty obvious why people like it. If you're more into cooperative play, you and friends can play as the same nation and really micromanage a front, such as the German invasion of Russia. But if you're more competitive, the game actually supports up to 32-player multiplayer, which means if everyone takes a unique nation, you'll be playing as most of the larger nations in the entire world, which makes things pretty interesting. Now, people can come and go as they want, so you don't actually need to have 32 people all online at once. Finally, the last main reason to play this game. The modding scene in Hearts of Iron 4 is insane. Some of these mods would really need their own video because they overhaul the game so much, adding new focus tree, new nations, some add tons of new features to the game. But in general, let me give one-line explanations of some of the biggest mods. So you have Millennium Dawn, which is a modern day mod giving a whole bunch of new tech and focus trees and mechanics. Kaiserreich, Germany wins World War I and you're in a completely different timeline. Führerreich, Germany loses World War I, but from the perspective of Kaiserreich. Road to 56 expands the game's ending from roughly 1948 to 1956, adding tons of focus trees, tech, and other content. The Great War, a World War I mod. Old World Blues, the Fallout universe but in Hearts of Iron 4. Look, honestly, I could keep going for quite a while just listing off mods, but I have to stop somewhere. Just trust me, this game has excellent mods, and I've left out some of the best ones. If you'd like to see a mod covered in future in this kind of video, just drop it in the comment and I might get around to making one. So in conclusion, Hearts of Iron 4 is a hell of a game. The base content alone is very substantial, but when you add in the powerful modding community, it becomes really special. If you like strategy but don't like World War II, you can probably find any number of mods to add in new scenarios or franchises that you love, with anything from 40k to the Napoleonic Wars getting their own mods. If you're on the fence, the game does go on sale pretty often, down to as low as €10 on Steam, or it can show up in humble bundles every now and then, so I'd keep my eye out there too. If you like this video and end up getting the game, or you send this to a friend to try and convince them to get the game, let me know. I'd love to hear about it, and why not check out some of my other videos while you're here.
It's a fine looking... Don't!